have John Henry Weston as our guest today on the Catholic Acc Conversations. John Henry, thank you for joining us this day today.
Great to be with you all, Jason.
We would like to know, LifeSiteNews, what led you to start LifeSiteNews, and what is the goal? What is the goal of LifeSiteNews? You being the editor-in-chief and co-founder.
That's right. Well, it was really founded mostly as a work of the Lord, because in all honesty, I was finishing a MA in school and child clinical psychology. I had a scholarship to do a PhD in the same, and didn't feel called to go on, and got sort of invited into the pro-life movement in a really weird way, and it just turned out that's what I was called to do, and started working that way on research sent out to pro-life leaders, just a few of them even. And when a pro-life group in Canada thought to start a website for themselves, they put, which was called LifeSiteNews, it's just called LifeSite, they decided to put my little news thing on there. And that was in 1997. And that really started it. So it really was no big grand plan or anything like that. I was a recent convert. I converted thanks to True Devotion in about 92. And then, my main mission at the time was to spread the truth, because I left the faith, unlike most people. I left from having a very good father who taught me the faith, and I left anyway. And then when I came back, I felt I really needed to share the faith that I had been given on a silver spoon but rejected for so long. So that, I guess, was in my heart in terms of what I wanted to do. And at LifeSite, we, hooked on to the big important issues of our day that are so crushing, the life issue and the family issue. So from there, we basically talk about now about spreading, it's sort of evangelizing through the news, if you will. We defend faith, life, family, and freedom. And right now, there's so much going on in terms of confusion that we really are just trying to get the truth out. Our Lord told us to, go to the ends of the earth with the truth and with Him. So that's what we're trying to do.
So you were actually born Catholic? Or raised
yes,
Catholic?
Very much so. Raised by a holy Catholic dad who was, very instrumental in terms of promoting the faith. He would teach us the faith all the time. Just about every conversation I had with him turned back to the faith somehow. But I rejected it nonetheless. So that's Hence, I really feel the need to give back.
Okay, so before we started, we were chatting before we actually started this interview officially, and we mentioned how both, for myself, Daniel, and Jason, LifeSite has been very inspirational for the three of us. It's been a go-to sort of site for us for a while now. Yeah, and in fact, even for our own through the looking glass, when we are, sort of reference incredible sites, LifeSite is one of them up there. The thing with LifeSite is I found it to be quite a polarizing news site. Channel. I personally have had to defend LifeSite News, where I've been told that it's divisive, whereas I've met people who are staunch supporters of LifeSite, and I've met people who are completely against it. They find that we listen to them, but we obviously support the position that you're coming from. But I'm sure you've heard this isn't news to you. What would you say to people who hold that opinion? That LifeSite tends to be critical and judgmental and, often bringing sort of negative news to Catholics as opposed to...
I want to sort of... Yeah. Some of you have gone to the extent where they say that LifeSite wants to make a schism in the church. Those type of jumping.
I'm sure you've heard all of
that.
Yeah.
So how would you
I have. Well, yeah. So nothing is further from the truth than that we want to create some kind of schism in the church. we love the church, and I can speak for every person on staff is in love with Christ. We do have a couple of evangelicals on staff, but they're fully aware of our mission, and we promote the love of Christ, and we have no interest at all in taking people away from the fullness of truth. So that notion is ridiculous for one thing, but for another, yes, it is difficult. And the truths of the faith are sometimes difficult to swallow, especially in a culture that really is against it in every which way, particularly the teachings on the family right now around homosexuality or transgenderism. Those are probably the things that many people would consider, very divisive right now. But our approach to it is very Catholic, if you will. It is not at all about hate or any kind of ill will towards people who are confused about their gender or people who are, have attractions that are not natural. Homosexual attractions are there just like any temptation to any sin. And I've told this to many people who suffer from same-sex attraction that, look, most men are inclined to thoughts, if they're married, to thoughts of adultery or impurity in some other way. And so everyone is fighting against temptations that they might have to disordered sexuality. And we're all called to do that. So we're there fighting ourselves, if you will, or these temptations right alongside you. So it's never about singling out a group or hating someone. It's about loving. And in fact, it's about loving enough to tell them that this is harmful for them, that this is hurting them. It's true, the homosexual lifestyle, if you know anything about it at all, it harms the body, gravely harms the body. It also, if you learn about psychology, it harms the psychology of a person, and obviously it harms the soul. And so we like to say, or I'll tell people, I care enough about you to tell you that this behavior is harming you, even though, for saying it, I'm called a hater and a bigot, and I don't like being called those things. I do it because, or we do it because we love those folks. And they're children of God. They're called to be in heaven. And many of these folks are really good people, really well-meaning, sacrifice in so many different ways. And so all that sacrifice, all that goodwill should be put into the faith where they can benefit for it eternally. So that's really our approach. And it's the exact same when it comes to the church. There's no intent to be mean, pick on people, be divisive, or anything like that. Our aim is to bring people to the truth and hold people to the truth, because our Lord said of bishops particularly, or the successors of the apostles, it would be better for you that you had a millstone tied about your neck and be thrown into the sea than you confuse the little ones. And that's what's happening with regard to the church right now. Many, many leaders in the church, bishops, cardinals, even the Pope himself, are confusing the faithful, confusing them in ways that are detrimental to their souls. And therefore, those individuals in the hierarchy will be held to account for the sins of all those people they're misleading. Those are really powerful and damaging things. So, yeah, we point it out and we hope for them because, to be honest, it would be better for a priest or bishop or even the Pope to lose their mitre, if you will, than to basically go to hell for misleading the faithful.
The point you made about the bishops and priests and even the Holy Father at times, it makes it so difficult for laity, for us, for you, for the other apostolates to be holding firm to the truths and to loving people, to love people enough to tell them the hard truths, because in their minds, why should they listen to us? The priests and bishops are giving them a different story, within the Catholic space, as we mentioned earlier. There are so many confusing voices and different voices. We have a friend who once said to us, what do I read? What do I believe? Do I believe what I'm reading on LifeSite and Church Militant and listening to Taylor Marshall? Or do I believe National Catholic Reporter? Or do I believe American Magazine? Or do I listen to what Father James Martin is saying? These people are all wearing Catholic hats, but they're giving a different message.
Yeah.
And when there is no strong, clear leadership, the flock does get confused, and those of us who are trying to sort of give the difficult, really difficult, true message, it's not an easy road.
Yeah. No, exactly. And one of the things
that's got worse since Vatican II, since the 60s. Was it something that always existed before?
No, it's gotten much worse since the 60s. At least before the Second Vatican Council, you had, for the most part, morality be morality. You didn't have this total abandoning of morals by those within the church, the hierarchy of the church, a huge portion of the hierarchy. So, but you did have that with Second Vatican Council, especially after, Second Vatican Council and Humanae Vitae. The rebellion to Humanae Vitae was massive, and that, I think, at least in the modern day, led to a sort of distrust within the hierarchy or within the clergy. So you had, first of all the laity and clergy themselves thought, well, everybody has a Catholic morality. That's just the starting point. Once the rebellion happened to Humanae Vitae, and bishops and cardinals and many, many, many priests and nuns rejected the teaching openly, signing their names in newspapers to reject it, all of a sudden you had this situation where the clergy, religious, and so on, for the first time realized, oh my gosh, we're not all coming from the same place. At one time, they probably would have said, we're not all Catholic. But we do live in this situation now where there's all this confusion out there. But the church can't change. The teachings of the church can never change. So that the teachings in the catechism that we have and are very handy, very good to have, because at least they can point us in the right direction. They will always know that abortion is a grave evil. We'll always know that homosexual acts are never acceptable and can't be done. These are mortal sins that lead people to hell. That masturbation, all these things that the modern world says are good, wonderful, normal, and healthy, and only make sense, like contraception, can never, ever change. They're immutable teachings of the church that can never, ever change. And so we've got to cling to the truths. That's why I think one of the most beautiful statements came from Bishop Schneider. He was speaking at a Rome Life Forum conference, which we run every year, and you're invited to. He said, when confronted with a heretic pastor, you have to say, I know my faith, and for this faith, I am ready to die. And we do. We have to know our faith. We have to study our faith. Even if you study the faith of children in the olden days, like the Baltimore Catechism we have, there's all sorts of old penny catechisms that you can probably get. That'll teach you the very basics of the faith. And the catechism, John Paul II still did give us a very good gift in the early 90s there with the catechism, the one that is in use right now still before it gets changed. Because there's all sorts of changes proposed to it now that are really not Catholic at all. So those are some very concerning things, but the faith doesn't change. So there's no way you can wonder what the truth is, because the truth never changes.
John Henry, just to go back to what I love that LifeSite is defending and you guys stand for is the family life, which is constantly under attack now in this 21st century more than ever. And I go back to Sister Lucia, the last living Fatima visionary, and I'm just going to paraphrase what she said. But she said, if I'm mistaken, the last battle between Satan and our Lord will be on the matter between marriage and family. How far along are we now with regards to this issue? And now how as faithful Catholics? Because when we start mentioning things such as we're against contraception, we're against abortion, our heads get taken out in this modern world. We can't have a voice. If we go to a homosexual person out of love for his soul, or her soul, it's looked at, you judging. So how can we reverse this evil that's in our world right now? How can we repair family life? How can we respond to Lucia's statement that she said as well?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. There's a lot there, but here's one thing: to the homosexuals, do talk about contraception, because when we never talk about contraception, we seem to talk about homosexuality. They wonder, oh yeah, nothing's a sin but being gay. And yet, if we talk to people who have homosexual attraction about, yes, the wrongness of that, but also the wrongness of contraception, they say, wait a minute, you're not serious, you're against contraception even for a married couple, right? Like hetero couple. You say, absolutely, yes. that actually might work for them. The statement you referred to from Our Lady through Sister Lucia came to Cardinal Caffarra. Cardinal Carlo Caffarra was asked by JP2 to start the Marriage and Family Institute, and he asked or wrote to Sister Lucia for prayers. He didn't expect a response back, just to write her and ask her for prayers. Well, she responded with this letter in which she reveals the quote that you talked about, that in the end, the final battle or decisive battle between our Lord and the reign of Satan would be over marriage and the family. She also gave some hopeful things there. She said that, don't worry, anyone who fights for marriage and the family will always be persecuted, but in the end, her Immaculate Heart would triumph. So, although that first part doesn't sound very comforting, perhaps, but it is true. She will triumph in the end, and we're called to suffer this. And at least for me, it's a really good thing to be able to expiate. I did a lot of things, and I still sin, and so we have this opportunity with the offering of these small little, people call us names, hate us, and sometimes threaten more, but we have the opportunity to offer that up, and so that's a great thing. And in terms of what times we're in right now, well, it does seem that much of what's going on revolves around marriage and the family. If you look at the whole culture war, you have abortion, same-sex marriage, homosexuality, pornography, transgenderism. All these things revolve around marriage and the family. Even the whole embryonic stem cell research and IVF and that whole thing. And so much of the culture war is concerned about this. And it's also interesting that you remember Our Lady told the three Fatima children, more souls, she told the Jacinta, I believe it was, more souls go to hell because of sins of the flesh than for any other reason. And in terms of where are we in by time, a lot of people do say, oh, it was much, much worse in the past. Much, much, much worse. And I always tell them they are dead wrong, and I can prove it to them. Because if in 1917 Our Lady came to say that more people go to hell because of sins of the flesh than for any other reason, we're in a much worse time now because there are more people alive today who are viewing porn regularly than there were people alive in 1917. So just by the numbers, we're dealing with something extraordinary. But there's a good news lining to all of that. Because do you remember in the scriptures, St. Paul says, where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more? Well, we have sin abounding in a way like we've never had before. Therefore, the grace is there for the asking, and it's ours to ask for.
John Henry, something else that is quite, I imagine, quite difficult for you, in light of everything we've discussed, is where we are being led down the wrong path, or where the teachings that we are receiving, the leadership we're being given is flawed. LifeSite is particularly brave and challenging and calling out for him to on things where he isn't infallible, and where some of the things he is saying and teaching and some of the things he's doing are very, very concerning.
For example, the United Nations, where they promoting use of contraception, for example.
I mean, we have many examples.
The Holy Father was not mentioned that Catholics shouldn't breed like rabbits. Again.
I mean, there are many examples. I think we all been familiar with it. How do you navigate that space?
Yeah, that is a hard question, because we did, for the first year or so, we really tried to. It was sort of benefit of the doubt, or couldn't have said that. One of the first interviews that came out. Yeah, so one of the first ones that came out that we never reported on, at least at the time, was because it was huge news. It was the one where the Pope said for the first time there's a gay lobby in the Vatican. But part of that same interview, it was a leaked interview from a conversation with Spanish religious, Latin American religious. And this is 2013, very early on. It was the first of the leaked interviews, if you will. And it was very disturbing, because in there was his talk about some guy had given him a rosary bouquet, had counted, I don't know, 1,300 or something rosaries. And he was complaining to this group of religious from Latin America, saying, "What's with the counting? Why would he count them? Why wouldn't he just say he prayed for me?" And when I read that, I thought, that can't be true, because no pope would ever cut up the rosary, for crying out loud. So we didn't report it. The next week I was in Rome, and I went to ask a person that I knew inside the Curia, and I said, was that real, that interview with the gay lobby has been promoted everywhere? All the media has it, and they're all treating it like it's true, but I don't believe it. Is it true? And he said, yes, it's true. In fact, he said, you're going to see lots of leaked interviews like that, because that's a new means of communications for the Holy Father. So that was very, very disturbing. And then, the whole host of other things came up, many, many things, including what you said about don't breed like rabbits, about cohabitation, is real marriage and has the grace of real marriage because of their fidelity, about contraception's okay in the cases of Zika virus, and so on and so forth. It just went on and on and on, contradicting the teachings of the Church in ways that are really profound, but in ways that confuse the faithful and lead them into sin. And that's where it really, really hurts. See, I have a daughter. In fact, I've got 8 kids, as you know. But I had a daughter who, in the year 2016, when the Pope made those comments about cohabitation, she called me from college and said, "Dad, is it true that the Pope said cohabitation is real marriage and has the grace of real marriage?" And I've asked many cardinals since, was I supposed to lie to my daughter? Because he did, in fact, say that. He was talking to a group of priests in Rome, July 16th, 2016, about an area in Argentina that he knew there where people were very faithful, but the men were afraid to marry, so they just lived together. But there was a lot of fidelity in those cohabitations, and he said those cohabitations are real marriage, and that they have the grace of real marriage. So, this stuff is deadly for our children, and I guess I could say that's really why we're fighting so hard, because we're fighting for our kids and for their faith, and therefore for their eternal salvation. So, despite many people who might say, "Oh, you're doing this for fame or for fortune or whatever," that's a joke. But we're doing this for our kids, and so we're not going to let up. And nothing can make us let up on protecting our kids' faith.
Because it is far easier. I'm also a parent. It's far easier, really, to just worry about your own soul and that of your immediate families. It's less. It's a way easier road. You don't come up against resistance, people commenting, talking about you, challenging you. It's difficult to do that. It's way easier to just, worry about the few of you. So there's got to be a bigger picture here. And it's a chance. It is souls. It's doing what Christ asked us to do.
Absolutely. There's another approach, too, from sometimes very, very good priests who said to me, "Oh, let's just be quiet for now. Keep your head down. It's going to pass. It's going to pass." The difficulty with that is, especially for those of us who have children, you can't do that, because they are influenced while this goes on. They're not going to. We can't shelter them from hearing anything about what the Pope is teaching for just a little while, just a few years. No, we can't do that. They're forming right now. So we can't be silent about these things. We do them with respect and with love. And that's what we've tried to do. This stuff is enraging, it is infuriating, it's really sad, but trying to maintain that sense of, well, you'll feel all those things, but still maintain a respect and love for the Holy Father, for whatever bishop or priest you're dealing with. It can be a challenge, but it's where we need to be. It's not where we need to go. That's the way our Lord would be. He would say things out of love. He would correct. He would say, "Get behind me, Satan," to the first pope. He would, say all sorts of things, but he would say them for love and with love. Even when driving people out of the temple, he's seriously angry, righteous anger, filled with zeal for the house of the Lord. But he does it in order, yes, to kick them out, but also to save their souls. And so that's the kind of thing, the attitude, the space we need to come from when we do these things.
I'm just thinking now, it is a dangerous road that we live in, because the amount of people that are losing their faith daily, especially children. I think the Pew Research Center came up with the stat with regards to the real parents in the Eucharist. And if you help me out here, how much? Two-thirds don't believe
in the States,
in the real parents of the Eucharist, which is the crux, the source and summit of our faith. And again, going back to the marriage and family life, there is this real gap between teaching and faith. Faith is not being transmitted. And who is to blame? Is it primarily the parents? Or is it shepherds that are not leading their flock how they should be? Because if the shepherds aren't leading their flock how they should be, parents are not knowing how to transmit the faith to their kids. So where does the blame, would you say, John, where's the blame lying directly?
Yeah. I mean, it all depends on who got what formation. And that's a real reality. A lot of the folks who are older had the formation in the faith that none of us receive anymore. And I had it thanks to my dad. And that's why it's on my heart to share it so much. But it's true, many people today have not been formed in the faith at all. Even their parents haven't been. So we're dealing with second, sometimes third generation of people who are totally uncatechized. They think the faith is something that it's not. And so that's a sad kind of reality. And that's why we need a new evangelization, if you will. And in a way, it's harder than the original evangelization, because in the original, at least, you're just introducing something new. It's in a way we've been inoculated against the faith, because everybody thinks they know it and they don't know it. They have some semblance of something that they call Catholicism, but that's not really what it is. So it's a great challenge. And yes, a lot in the hierarchy, who themselves, by the way, weren't formed. A lot of young priests weren't formed. But there's a lot of blame to go around. The ones who our Lord did say, to whom more is given, more is expected. So, I mean, if you are looking to who's going to get it the worst, the hierarchy there's a big problem for them. And that's why, we and you and many people work so hard to try and bring the hierarchy back on side. It's not about trying to punish them or anything. We would like nothing more than for wayward priests or bishops or even the Pope to come back on side and convert and become really, really, really holy. I mean, can you imagine if Pope Francis, with all of his chutzpah, were to bring on the faith and tell all the Father James Martins out there that they've got to shape up or leave the church, and people should start kneeling for Holy Communion again? I mean, it would be incredible, because someone with that kind of cavalier attitude, in a way, he'd be one of the only ones who would actually do something like that in the first place. So yeah, there's great hope amidst all of the craziness, because this is our Lord's battle. They are His children, His special sons, the priests, and all of our kids and our contemporaries are all His kids. So, we're there to try and be His hands and feet and mouth, if you will, and let Him use us to try and reach His kids, His children. And I think that's where we need to be coming from.
And John Henry, something that's lacking in the South African Catholic space is we are very unfortunate. We use the word unfortunate because we do not have the traditional Mass in this country. The traditional Mass is despised in a way in this country. And I remember reading an article about what the young people want, and how the young people actually Andrew's telling me about it. He was speaking about the young people that they want that which is sacred, they want to feel the reverence, they want to go back into that traditional space. This is the research that is done. And I find, especially from the novice order Mass, is that the priests going up to the pulpit, we don't hear things such as the last four things being spoken about. We don't hear things about devotion to the Holy Rosary, the brown scapula. Those things have really been thrown out from the novice order Mass. And I also think, personally, that's been a reason for a lot of the loss of the faith, of watered down Catholicism. Would you agree, or would you all?
Well, it's not necessarily characteristic of the Novus Ordo not to have those elements, because I mean there should be faithful preachers in Novus Ordo in Novus Ordo churches as well. So there's a lot of faithful priests, at least in our country in America, who are, yes, they say the Novus Ordo Mass. Many of them probably don't even know Latin, so can't say the Latin Mass, but who are nonetheless faithful. Especially on life and family issues, on the four last things. It is true, though, that there is in terms of comparison, if you compare the number of priests who say the Novus Ordo to the number of priests who say the traditional Mass, for instance, who have ever spoken on hell in a homily or warned of it, there'd be a massive discrepancy, that's for sure. Tradition lends itself to tradition, and so you get traditional teaching from traditional priests for the most part. That's not a big surprise. The Novus Ordo too, in terms of its departure from proper practice, and what I'm referring to there is things like having a communion rail, kneeling for Holy Communion, the reverence at Mass. You can have that still with a Novus Ordo, particularly if you have proper hymns and the music is well done. But all of these elements are sort of in the Latin Mass by itself. The Mass itself lends itself to the devotion and the reverence. And you can't have, wonky music. So it is much easier at a Latin Mass, at a traditional Mass, to have that sense of reverence. But hopefully it can be captured in the Novus Ordo with good priests doing faithful things. I mean, it is here at our local parish. We have a very reverent Novus Ordo Mass. We have probably 40 or 50 altar boys. And usually about 20 or so at a time on a Sunday. And so, they still do an altar rail, they kneel for Holy Communion for the most part. The priest encourages us in tradition. And even a former priest here used to say Mass ad orientem as well, and the Novus Ordo only. So, there's a possibility of reverence in the Novus Ordo as well, for sure.
Well, we are really privileged, and thank you, John Henry, for giving us time. I know you're such a busy man, and we would like to say, just keep fighting the good fight, fighting the fight for our Lord, winning souls for our Lord, and educating souls in the glorious faith of our Catholic faith. And we'd really like to thank you, and I hope you have a fantastic Christmas, and may God bless you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason and Angela and Dan, for all of your hard work to spread the faith. Keep going with that. Entrust yourselves to Our Lady, because she's the real driving force in all of this, and I'm sure you have, but true devotion to Mary, St. Louis de Montfort, is the way to go on everything. The fastest way to Christ is through His Holy Mother. May God bless you all. Have a very happy and holy Christmas. Ave Maria.
Thank you.
Thanks, John Henry.
Bye now.